in real terms, nominal terms, ratio terms, however you want to look at it, there's more debt outstanding now than in the history of history.
They now have to keep printing or we crash.
We've got this ticking time bomb.
Talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire.
Welcome to Live from the Vault.
Welcome to Live from the Vault. My name is Shane Moran, and I'll be your host for this episode. And as you can see, for the first time in 2023, I am back in the vault. Happy to be here. And from the entire Live from the Vault team worldwide, we want to thank you for your continued support. It's amazing. As you can imagine, this community keeps growing and growing more and more every single week. And, there's a lot to talk about during these historic times. And Andrew Maguire is in the house with an industry expert, and by popular demand from the Live from the Vault community, the one and only Mr. Bill Holter will be joining us today, and we'll be talking gold here. So this is going to be an amazing episode, and you don't want to miss a word, again, during these historic times. Now, Live from the Vault gives you access to information and updates that you just can't get anywhere else, and this episode is going to be no exception. So just before we get to talking gold with Andrew Maguire and our special guest, Mr. Bill Holter, please help us keep spreading the word by hitting that like button. Spread the word about this channel, share it, subscribe, and if you click on that bell right there, you'll be notified in real time as each episode goes live. So let me introduce our special guest today, Mr. Bill Holter. Since leaving Wall Street more than a decade ago, Bill has made a name for himself as an astute and highly respected market commentator and a writer also. And he has been, of course, a Live from the Vault community favorite. And why is that? Well, because Bill helps other people discover the dangers of our debt-based economy and how they can protect themselves against it. And with that, let's head over to the UK and talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire and our special guest, Mr. Bill Holter. Over to you, Andy.
Bill, it is actually a privilege to have you back here joining us for a chat. We've had so many requests for you, my friend. You're renowned as a straight shooter who has really insightful view into the smoke and mirrors world of these complex global markets. They don't have to be complex, but again, we need people like you to come and discern what's going on. So just as I may, last time we spoke, you were involved with Miles Franklin as a broker. Is that correct? A wholesale broker?
Right.
And now you have just launched a service, is it, with a website?
Yeah, I've been a broker with Miles Franklin for, I guess 10 plus years now.
Yeah.
And I wrote for Miles Franklin until 2015. I worked with Jim Sinclair for 6 or 7 years. And I just started my own website. It can be found at billholter.com. It'll be very similar to JS Mindset. As I wrote in the introduction, I think it's still top of the page. JS Mindset was a PG rated site. Mine may be a little edgier. It was PG out of respect for Jim. And billholter.com will be, like I said, a little more edgy.
So coming out with guns blazing then, Bill?
Well, I don't know about guns blazing, but yeah, we've got a lot of content. I just started it this past weekend, and there's a good amount of content on there already. Fantastic.
I'm certainly going to go on there. And is it a subscription service? How's that going to work?
Now, at this point, I don't really have any plans to make it a subscription service, although that may happen. But at this point, just click on it and you'll get all the content.
This is the beauty of this. This is what I love about what we're trying to do here with you and other people. It's about education. It's about, I just had an interview with Alistair McLeod, for example, and really we just say, this is all about education. And if we can just bring more information to people to make wiser choices, then my goodness me, isn't that what this is all about?
Yeah, and it's like you said to start, it is a crazy world at this point. And I'm certainly not a rocket scientist. but I was blessed by God with common sense. And apparently, common sense is a scarce commodity these days.
It sure is. If somebody came out with a common sense political party, I think they'd win everybody's vote.
But they might not win the election. They might get everybody's vote, but they might not win the election.
I'm going to ask you, because you're that side of the pond, and while we see a lot of the wholesale stuff this side and one thing, all the smoke and mirror stuff this side, I think it's something the Fed, I'm interested in this whole, I mean, you've done a lot of work on 1913, the Fed and the Jekyll Island, et cetera, but the Fed right now, I mean, we just saw a little while ago, we saw FOMC, we saw non-farm payrolls. Oh, God, those numbers looked unbelievable, but
they're not to be believed.
No.
Actually, when you break it down, instead of 517,000 jobs added, it was actually 2.5 million jobs lost, because that's what BLS does, is they adjust. And in January, they adjusted a positive 3 million jobs. And that's basically out of thin air. So the real number for January, if you take the 3 million jobs added, it was a loss of 2.5 million.
My goodness me! I mean, that changes the picture a little bit. I mean, the idea. I mean, the idea that this isn't some part of the whole rigged smoke and mirrors world, is that Bloomberg. I listened to Bloomberg a lot of the day. I mean, they came out and didn't believe those numbers either. They said, "Hang on, this is not believable." But Bloomberg was talking about that Biden and Harris had already pre-booked and announced I guess an appearances on TV, etc. Well, they wouldn't have done that if they'd have known it was a miss, and they pre-booked it well before the release. So it just kind of tells me, how much bloody information do they have for the insiders to game well before this? I mean, they must have enough of that data the day before to actually act on it.
Yeah, that's an easy answer. The answer is all of it.
I love your answers.
And Andrew, you mentioned the creature from Jekyll Island, and then mentioned the FOMC. I really believe we are in the absolute last inning of that book, the last inning of that plan. And just look at what's happened. I mean, the West is entirely indebted in real terms, nominal terms, ratio terms, however you want to look at it. There's more debt outstanding now than in the history of history. And what have they done? They've raised interest rates. First off, they've made the world debt slaves, and that we just have gone through the quickest rate hike cycle in all of history, and something that I don't think really anybody else is talking about is the fact that M2 money supply over the last 15, 16 months is actually down 5%. And that's the first time ever you've seen money supply collapse and go negative for a 12-month period of time since the Great Depression. If you go back and look during the Depression, yeah, money supply did drop, and that was a big cause of popping that debt bubble. But think about a Ponzi scheme, and that's what the Western finance is a Ponzi scheme. All Ponzi schemes have to have new money coming in. And where we are right now, they've raised rates, making it more difficult to pay debt service on anything adjustable. You can't roll loans over because you're rolling them over at much higher rates. And on top of that, the money supply is contracted. So really, to me, it looks like a planned demolition of the Ponzi scheme. And read The Creature from Jekyll Island to the very end, and that's the plan, is to get the world indebted and blow up the system. And what's left? You've got a bunch of debt serfs with the elites owning everything. And what is Klaus Schwab actually said? You will own nothing and you'll be happy. Now, I would believe the you'll own nothing part, but I'm not so sure people are going to be happy.
Sure as hell won't be. I think, again, it's now we've got the ideas of, I've seen it from your side as well as this side, as almost globally. It's like, central bank digital currencies are really one of the tools that they want to create. You talked about the shrinking money supply. You talked about the setup, the Ponzi scheme blowing up, deliberately being set to blow up. That has to be. They need that in place, don't they, before they can do this?
Actually, I think it may be the other way around. I think they may blow things up and then tell people, we'll save you with this new currency system. The only problem is a central bank digital currency system allows the powers that be to track anything and everything you do down to a stick of gum. And if you disagree with the official narrative, they'll just shut your account off, and you'll be silenced and basically killed, because how are you going to live if you don't have money to make purchases? They'll also be able to control where you go, just from the standpoint of, your digital currency will only work within a however many mile radius, and if you exit that radius, it doesn't work. So it's all about control, and anybody who's happy about a digital currency coming is either knows what the plan is or is completely stupid.
Yeah, it's about, and again, we saw that the attempt with this COVID Ponzi scam. We saw people being opting in to have digital passports if you want to travel, and then so a lot of us chose not to travel.
Well, Andrew, you saw that also in Canada with the trucker. You remember they were shutting people's bank accounts off if they donated $10 to the truckers. So I mean, they really showed their hand with that. I mean, I think that for anybody that thinks critically and saw what happened in Canada, then they saw in real time what will happen with the central bank digital currency. Anybody who even comes on your show or goes to my website or does interviews like we're doing now will be shut off.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So in other words, it's like a social credit system more than money. It's about.
It has nothing to do with money. But like I said, I think the implementation, I think they will destroy the financial system first. And like the slogan goes, build back better. That's what they're going to tell you is, the central bank digital currency system can't go bankrupt, blah, 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 which is a bunch of bullshit. But, I think they will use a crisis to bring the central bank digital currency into place. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously we see Biden and people talking about build back better, but to build back better, you've got to destroy something first.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a scary situation. I think, a lot of people ask me, well, what do we do then to fight this? I know that I imagine in places like Italy, certain European countries, some of the Eastern European countries, you might see, and certainly Switzerland is now currently voting on whether we should, it's in their law so that you must always have enough physical cash for the population. I'm hoping there's a bit of enough of a kickback here against these World Economic Forum fools who are trying to instigate this on us all.
Well, you just mentioned Switzerland's having a vote. It's pretty clear that the elections worldwide have been tampered with. So for the Swiss to vote to get rid of currency, I don't think the population would do that, but I think that's what you very well may see as the result. Now, interestingly enough, if you go back, I guess, 30 years or so, Switzerland, I believe the number was 40%. They, by law, had to keep 40% of their reserves in gold. And they were the last currency that had any tie to gold. And now, of course, everything is fiat. And what is the Swiss National Bank now? It's either the largest or second largest hedge fund in the world. They compete with the Norwegian central bank as being the largest hedge fund in the world. I mean, they're speculating. They lost 143 billion last year. I think that was the number. I mean, they're speculating with the reserves. So what does that mean for the currency itself? Is it solid or is it a speculation?
This is really cutting edge stuff, and I think people aren't thinking enough about it. So when you go and pay for your Starbucks coffee, and you just use your watch and etc. Essentially there are places now that won't accept cash at all. So really, then I guess one of the other movements is where you would start to boycott those places unless they also accept cash. But it's a scary situation, and I think I think the interesting thing is as I'm sure you know as well, that on the first trading day of this year, on the 2nd of January, blindsided the market. Sberbank, the Russian Sberbank, came out and digitized physical gold, put it on the blockchain, on the Stellar blockchain, trustless blockchain, and with a view to, and we've just done an interview with Alistair McLeod, who also really thinks this is correct, that they were going to use the only currency that is able to price commodities for sale is gold. And you have to have it in small enough increments to be able to price commodities in gold. And I think, is this something that is going to sideswipe or counter this effect that we're only 1.8 billion people. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is 3.8 billion people. And then there's Africa, and there's. Do you think there may be some that they won't be able to impose this, because you can't just impose it on some of the world?
Right. Yeah. The trade will change. I think was very smart, very forward thinking to put gold on the blockchain to use as a trade settlement item. Now, there will be those that argue, well, there's just not enough gold in the world to be able to settle global trade. Well, even if you had just 1 ounce, that 1 ounce is enough at a higher price, a much higher. But my point being, gold is so undervalued right now. When it does get to its fair value, uninhibited by paper contracts that are being sold, naked contracts, etc. Once you get to a much higher price, then yeah, sure, there is plenty of gold in the world just to settle global trade. So I think that will be, or is, the one big argument. There's just not enough gold, but that's a bad argument.
And yet we see every central bank, even in 2022, just what was reported, the 1,130 odd tons, that is the largest central bank gold purchase since Nixon shut the gold window. So some things are really radically changing here. And if the central banks, they're, for the very reason you're just talking about, they're adopting gold and literally hoarding gold because they know something's coming down the pipe. And I think, we've got this conflict between the East and the West now. And obviously Russia, China, BRICS plus, all now happily dealing in oil contracts in different currencies as well as gold. I'm just hoping, Bill, I may be wrong, but I'm just hoping that this World Economic Forum, there's an equivalent World Economic Forum in the SEO, but they've got the opposite agenda, which is to empower people. So I'm just hoping that we're not all going to be sucked in to this vortex.
Well, understand why central banks have been hoarding gold, buying gold for their reserves. They understand, I mean, I'm sure every central banker in the world looked at Saudi Arabia saying that they would accept yuan for oil, they will accept other currencies for oil. That basically was an announcement of the end of Bretton Woods too, the petrodollar. That's the end of it. So these central banks, they understand that the days of the dollar being the reserve currency are over. And I think the number now is under 60% is the portion that dollars represent for reserves in global central banks on their balance sheets. So these central banks, they're looking at it and saying, okay, we're at risk of major losses in our reserves. So what they're doing, and they do understand that gold is going to be revalued much higher. So what they're doing is they're front running, if you will. They're buying gold now for the revaluation because they understand that the dollar portion of their balance sheet is going to get hammered and leave huge losses on their balance sheet. So how do you counteract that? There's only really one way for them to counteract it. I mean, you can't do it with contracts because contracts can be broken. But gold cannot default, gold cannot bankrupt. And when it's revalued higher, that will plug the huge black holes of default, if you will, whatever you want to call it, on their balance sheet. So I think the central banks they certainly are acting in their own best interest.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned all these different countries now dealing in other currencies than the dollar for oil. I mean, anyone that ever tried that before, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, were killed. But then you're now dealing with nuclear superpowers. Probably Russia's probably got better armaments than the US. It's China, I'm sure, has too. I mean, that balloon that came over the other day, in 2018, they filmed and tested a balloon with missiles.
With hypersonic missiles, which is something we don't have yet.
Unbelievable. So, something's going on here. So you wouldn't be attacking, and NATO wouldn't be attacking Russia directly. There has to be a point where this thing gets called out before everyone gets blown up. And I think there's got to be a peace settlement at some point. What do you think?
Well, what's going on in Ukraine right now with NATO supplying arms to Ukraine, I mean, it's basically NATO against Russia, but it's a proxy war.
Yeah,
we're using Ukraine as a pawn. And really, if you read all of the statements that Putin has made, and I've urged people to do that, read his statements. They all make common sense, and they're logical from a business standpoint. And I think one of the big problems that will come out when all this is said and done is we're going to find out just how corrupt and evil the workings were within Ukraine. I mean, one of the things you're going to find out, and it's somewhat out there, but just think about the biological weapon labs that are in Ukraine. I think the number was something like 56 of them.
Yeah.
So, a lot of that news or information is going to come out, and we're going to find out just how dirty and evil it's been.
And of course, there's so many trails for the Biden family leading into Ukraine that have been suppressed, basically.
I'm sorry, I got a dog here that's growling. I got somebody outside my door.
Well, he's doing his job.
Exactly.
Well, is there someone that at the door that can open it?
I'm actually, I'm last day of a trip. I'm down at the beach and it's out in the hallway. They've got a vacuum cleaner. So she's growling at it.
Yeah, well, that's. I sometimes feel like I want to growl at the vacuum cleaner, but Bill, this is so interesting. This is such a buzz here. Now, every single bank that we have spoken to is of the opinion, saying that they're betting that the Fed has triggered a commodity supercycle with expectations of record commodity prices in 2023. I mean, this is aside from the other drivers we're talking about. And so that really tells us, if that's the case, even forgetting all the fundamentals and the pragmatic stuff, gold and silver have to be grossly undervalued. But I think this is kind of leading me into something. So as far as commodities are concerned, silver, which has a commodity component, will outperform. Now, I remember in our last chat, you said something about silver being the fuse to really ignite the system. Do you think, is this something that we should be thinking about?
Well, yeah, it is the fuse because it's such a small market. You couldn't have silver blowing through $100, $200 and gold not moving. And gold is, if you want to call it the anti-fiat, it's the antithesis to fiat currency. I want to, clarify, you mentioned you've talked to banks and they're talking about a commodity supercycle. Rather than calling it a commodity supercycle, I think the better way to call it is a fiat collapse.
Yes. Yes.
Because everything's priced in fiat, and if commodities are exploding in fiat terms, that means fiat is imploding in real terms.
Yeah, it's the same as, I guess, you're absolutely right. For example, someone tells me, oh, my house went up by 15% last year. No, it took 15% more money to buy the same building.
Right, the currency went down. And one more thought on silver. The ratio now it's back over 80-1, the silver to gold ratio.
Yeah.
It comes out of the ground at 10-1. So man's ratio is 80-1. God's ratio is 10-1. Which one's right and which one's wrong? For hundreds of years, it was 16-1. And the reason being, even though it comes out of the ground at 10-1, they had to transport it. So whether they're transporting it by horse, by carriage, by mule, what have you, silver was discounted simply because you had to transport 10 times the amount to get the same value as gold. So instead of 10-1, man discounted it to 16-1, and that made sense. But 80-1 is absolutely absurd. And you and I have talked about this before. The reason they have sat on silver so hard is because they cannot allow silver to take off, because if that were to happen, then you'll get excitement in gold. And no matter what you want to say, gold is a thermometer versus fiat currency. So if you've got gold rising, if we had $5,000 or $10,000 gold, what would the dollar be purchasing? It would expose fiat for what it is, worthless.
Yeah, and I think we saw a tiny inkling of that in that ring-fenced LME world where nickel blew up simply on the basis that they couldn't deliver the physical because of a sudden demand for whatever the reason. And of course they could contain that, couldn't they? Because it was the tiny little market. But silver, as you say, it's a global market. So
nickel's a global market also. Nickels and silver, they're both small in relation to in relation to other markets. But the bottom line is they did not have the physical nickel available to deliver versus the contracts that were sold. And the result was over a 2-day period, a Friday and a Monday, you had nickel prices rise 250% in 2 trading days. The second trading day, they canceled all the trades. I mean, that's blatantly illegal. They novated the contracts, and you cannot novate a contract, but they did. And I mean, I believe there still are lawsuits ongoing, but by and large, the lawsuits to this point have not gone anywhere. But the bottom line is that's what really many of the commodity markets look like. You've got paper shorts without the physical ability to deliver on that. And I know you and I have both been talking about this since 2005, 6, 7, something like that. I met you originally at the GATA conference in 2011. And I mean, this game has been going on for years and years and years. And the amount of contracts outstanding versus the ability to deliver it's laughable. Oh, and something else, Andrew. I just found out, I guess it was yesterday, that the COT Traders Report for silver has not been updated since January 24th.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yeah, what was the excuse? Saying that they had a third-party data provider that wasn't timely, or something ridiculous like that. I mean, Bill, we know. Do you remember? I mean, you remember this, that when Tocom used to trade back in the day, every single day, at the end of every single day, we would get a list of every single bank, long, short, movement that day, exact amounts. And then what happened is that because people started focusing on that and realizing, hang on, same actors in the COMEX, but that's hidden. But now we know what they're doing. So it proves, but it still proves that they could publish COT data at the end of every single day if they didn't throw it into this sort of smoke and mirrors, like, let's hide some of the data.
Right. And I guess just to illustrate for your listeners, what you're basically saying is the Tocom numbers were chum in the water for sharks to attack the shorts. Or if someone was overly long, and you knew their balance sheet, you knew they couldn't handle that size of a long or a short without using leverage, they would get attacked and their position would get wiped out. And I mean, those days were much, much better because there was so much more transparency. Now everything's hidden. And the only thing you get to see is price. And like Bill Murphy says, price makes market commentary. So, if silver's down, you just make up a reason for it to be down and leave out the part where, there was 5 or 10,000 contracts sold naked short. And all you have to do is talk about the price and say, see, it's going down. It's a bad investment. It's scary. Don't buy it. And that's what they've done is for years and years and years, they've tried to scare, if you will, demand away from precious metals.
Yeah, and chart painting, using vast amounts of paper to chart paint. Look, let's face it. The average commodity trading advisor, they have no mandate to take any physical delivery anyway. Will never take physical delivery. So therefore, and these fools go and borrow their margin from the same bank holding a book on them and wonder why they know exactly what pain point there is to rinse them out. Laughable.
Well, they don't get rinsed out if they're on the correct side, meaning the side of the official narrative.
Yeah, but then I guess...
Andrew, let me just mention this. I think I've mentioned it before, but it's been a while. If you wake up in the morning, you look at the news, and basically everything that you see is woke, complete bullshit, upside down lies. then why would you believe that the prices that you see for the stock market, the interest rates on the bonds, the prices of commodities, the price of gold, the price of silver, why would you believe those if everything else you look at, is complete bullshit? Why?
Yeah. That is the question to ask. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and think about this, Andrew. You have been called a conspiracy theorist. I've been called a conspiracy theorist. But guess what? Most everything we've talked about over the years has been proven factual. So all we were doing was pointing out conspiracies. They weren't theories. They turned out to be fact.
Yeah.
And I told you, before we started recording, I'm not a rocket scientist. I just have common sense. God gave me common sense, and I use it. I look at stuff, and one of my God-given talents is a good nose to be able to smell out bullshit. I can look at something for 30 seconds and point at it and say, that's wrong.
Yeah. It's like an algorithm, that's built in one's own mind, because do you know what, Bill? It takes experience to get that. And then that's why it's important to have people like yourself here, because it's a part of the discernment process. You know what I mean? There's so much data out there.
The easiest way to ferret out truth versus falsehood is whatever the official narrative is, whatever you see on mainstream media, whatever the governments are telling you, it's a lie. They've gone so far that at this point they've made it really easy to tell what's real and what's not real.
Good point.
And you can take that side and then start digging and figure out why. If it's not, overtly in your face, the answer, but you can take a position against whatever the mainstream media or mainstream narrative is. You take the position against that, and then you can dig and prove to yourself why it's wrong.
Yeah, that is so true. So we've got, I think you mentioned, I saw something recently you mentioned, and I took this from you, that there's something like 350 trillion in debt, and this current debt just cannot possibly be paid in current dollars. So obviously, is this kind of back to the the central bank digital currency talk again, or is that
the debt that's outstanding? And that $350 trillion number, just understand that that's on books debt. That's not including derivatives. Think about the U.S. The U.S. has, if you tally everything up, all the promises, all the guarantees, all the debt on the books, there's debt off the books. If you tally all that, the U.S. has 200 trillion just on its own. So that 350 trillion number is extremely low, but even at 350 trillion, it can't be paid back.
Do you know these numbers? I sometimes make the mistake of trying to imagine $1 trillion. It actually starts to fuse the mind, because it's such a big number, and then you're talking about quadrillions now. Quadrillions. It's like, this is, it's amazing.
Quadrillion is 1,000 trillion.
Of basically bilaterally settled, unreported bets between two different parties with no regulation, none whatsoever. Mind-blowing.
There's no regulation and there's zero transparency, because you have party A doing business with party B, and there's no oversight and you don't see it. And what happened back in 2008, and what will ultimately happen again, I think fairly soon, is that, so we just talked about party A and party B. Now is party C going to do business with either A or B if either of those get in trouble? And the problem with derivatives is it's a zero-sum game. There's a winner and there's a loser. And if the loser loses so big that they bankrupt, then the winner loses because he can't get paid.
And if if one of those components happens to be one item of the daisy chain of the too big to fail taxpayer funded banks, end of story.
It's over. Yep.
We came pretty close to that with Lehman, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And my mistake, I moved my family out of the country at the end of 2006 because I saw 07, 08 coming. What I missed, and I've admitted this over the years, what I missed is I never believed that the central banks and sovereign treasuries would bankrupt themselves in order to keep the system going. What I guess what I missed was the end of the creature from Jekyll Isle. They wanted to get everything, everyone entangled in the web of debt. They wanted the entire West to become, a serfdom society to debt. So the amount of money, what was the number that it was 16 trillion that the Federal Reserve lent out to foreign entities back in 2008, 2009. Where did that money come from? Well, it came from thin air. And they were able to kick the can down the road. And like I said, what I missed was I didn't believe that they would bankrupt themselves. But what will they do with the central bank digital currencies? You'll have no idea how much is outstanding. And you'll be told the sovereign treasury is solvent, the central bank is solvent, your funds are good. And in reality, it's all a mirage.
And I think there's so many little components here that could break this system. Just what we talked about earlier, pricing commodities in gold grams is going to be massively inflationary when priced in dollar terms. So that has to break some of these bets, some of these bilateral bets are surely keying on a certain range. And if it's blown out of that range, they're in trouble. Right.
And I know you've talked about this also. We're obviously the currency, because the currencies are fiat, we are going to have a humongous inflation worldwide like we've never seen. We're also going to experience deflation at the same time. You're going to see many asset prices that have been pushed up via the use of credit to fuel the purchasing. You're going to see deflation in assets. You're already seeing that around the world. There's one other event that I believe is going to be massively deflationary. And I think it has to do with COVID. It has to do with the vaccine. Many people, and I don't know what the numbers are, whether it's more than 50% or whatever, but you can see with your own eyes that people who got the vaccine, got the second shot, got the booster, they're dying. At 15 years old, at 25 years old, at 50 years old. A population die-off, which I'm convinced you're watching it in real time. A population die-off is going to be it's going to be a massive deflationary event. Just think about when someone dies, they're no longer a consumer, and whatever assets they have, they may get split amongst the family, the surviving family, but a lot of those assets will be sold. And what does that do? It hits the bid and it pushes the prices down. So I think that's a very big, not immediate, but I do believe that's a very, very big future event that's going to happen, is deflation caused by depopulation.
Really, I think, Bill, I guess we have to try and put this down to an action point for ourselves. And I think what I would ask is someone as really as with such good common sense and as you know, really, I guess, what is the first thing people should do? People are looking at this and thinking, you know what? Hang on, I've read Jekyll Island. Yeah, that last chapter. Hey, hang on, what we've just been talking about here. It's the playbook's out there. So what do I do? Obviously, the first thing you would logically do is get all your money out of the banking system. What else? What else should people be thinking about, Bill?
Well, my partner, Jim Sinclair, had coined the phrase GOTS, get out of the system. You want to become as self-sufficient as you possibly can. And like you said, that means getting your money out of the banks, out of the insurance companies, into something that's safe and can't default. And by definition, there's only two monies on the planet that cannot default, and that's gold and that's silver. Once you've done that, you have other assets that you want to get out of the system. You have annuities with an insurance company. What happens when the insurance company goes broke? Mm-hmm. You have stocks with a stockbroker. What happens when your stockbroker goes broke? Very simple. Get your stock certificates, have them issued to you. That way you have proof that you own the shares. And if your broker goes down with your stocks on their balance sheet, you're not going to be tied up in bankruptcy court for 3 years, 5 years more. Who knows? From a personal standpoint, you want to become as self-sufficient as you can. You want to have an alternative power source. You want to have an alternative water source. You want to have food sources. Before the call, we were talking about, the guns were confiscated in England. You want to have a source you want to be able to protect yourself. You want to be able to protect your assets. The whole idea is be as self-reliant as you can, do the best you can. You definitely will find that you've missed some things, and don't beat yourself up over it. Just do the best you can, but become self-reliant and don't have intermediaries between you and what you need to live.
That is great advice. It's the opposite of being woke. It's about taking personal responsibility for everything. And there's no such thing as a mistake. It's a learning process. And as you say, all we can do, this is what I love about these sessions, is that it's about education. It is all about education. And people are going to look at this, and there'll be people that haven't maybe seen you before. And I think that's doubtful, but I know there are people that we've cast a very wide net. I think we had over 200,000 hits on our first one, and it goes out wider. And our friend that we did an art studio recording for, he sent it out to yacht clubs and thousands of people. So there'll be people that are latching on, that are listening to this for the first time. And although we, as you say, it's an own goal for us. We know everyone that's listening to our normal understand this, what we're talking about, really understand it, and are just getting more information. But there are other people watching this who won't, and it'll be an eye opener for them. And I think if that's the case, if we've helped one person, I'd be very happy.
Absolutely.
But Bill, thank you so much. I feel the beach is calling. It's right outside your door. The dog's growling at the vacuum. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would ask if we can come back again, and maybe in a little while, and just catch up with where we are, because 2023 looks to be rolling out a little bit differently faster than any other year that we've ever started. And it's easy to say, but I really believe that.
I certainly will, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Bill. Your pleasure. And we will put out by the way, if you could one more time mention your new website, that I would encourage people to go and visit.
Very simple, billholter.com.
Like everything, straightforward, straight shooter, straightforward websites. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew Maguire, and our special guest, Mr. Bill Holter, for another fascinating discussion here in the precious metals industry. Hey, remember, buy physical, buy only physical, and make sure it's one-to-one. And understand the difference between what Andy affectionately calls the casino paper gold and silver market and the actual physical gold and silver markets. They're not the same. Don't be fooled. And there you have it. That's all we have for you today on another amazing episode of Live from the Vault. Now, remember, help us spread the word about this channel by hitting that like button, by sharing this video, and by subscribing. Now, if you hit the bell notification right there, we will notify you as each episode goes live. And with that, we'll see you next time right here on Live from the Vault. See you then.